And without further ado, in order to speak more extensively about this whole aspect of our affairs, the where we are now, the what's going to happen next, and to set out the broad vista for us, is our leader, Nigel Farage MEP.
Hello, everybody. Morning. Very good. Hi, thank you very much indeed. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I got to tell you, that was a much warmer reception than I had in Edinburgh the other week. It really was. Come to it, it wasn't so friendly in Brighton on Monday either, but more of that in a moment. Well, what an amazing political year 2013 has been for this party. Because it all started back in January, when the man that is our Prime Minister, you know the chap, Cast Iron Dave, as he used to be known, and who'd spent the whole of 2011 and 2012 telling us that there would not be an in-out referendum in this country because he wanted Britain to remain a member of the European Union. Do you remember that? Yeah. Time and again he said it. And then UKIP started scoring higher and higher in the opinion polls, and we were told there was going to be a big speech. And the speech got delayed and delayed, but in the end, in January, he made the speech. And I was told on the day by many in the broadcast and print media that the UKIP's fox had been shot. That there was no problem anymore because David Cameron had promised us a referendum. Well, how interesting that the great British public simply didn't believe him. They don't trust him. They really don't trust him at all. And frankly, let's put our side of the case. It simply isn't good enough to say to the British people that if the Conservatives form a majority, doesn't look very likely, does it? But it isn't good enough to say that if the Conservatives were to form a majority, that after a renegotiation in which it's pretty clear that nothing substantial could be won back, that we might have a referendum in 4.5 years' time. And the message that goes to David Cameron is we are not prepared to wait 4.5 years to have a referendum on who governs Britain. We want a referendum to determine our future, and we want it now. Well, shortly thereafter, the Eastleigh by-election happened. Hoon pleaded guilty, and a by-election was called with very, very short notice. And everybody thought that on the back of the Prime Minister's referendum pledge, that the Conservatives had a real chance. Well, in those cold 3 weeks, with Diane James as our candidate, and with what has been one of the best established and most active branches in the southeast over many, many years, in those 3 weeks, UKIP went from 3.6% of the vote to 28% of the vote. What a huge turning point Eastleigh's been for us. In fact, if it hadn't been for the postal votes, I think we would actually have come first. And I think Eastleigh changed everything. And it set the tone for the English County Council elections. Now, as you know, last year, when we came here last year, albeit to a room of half this size with half the number of delegates, when we came here last year, I called for a volunteer army to come forward and to make sure that people here in the southeast had the chance to go out and vote UKIP on May the 2nd. And I have to say that given that there were more county council seats up in the southeast than over the rest of England, the fact that we managed to field candidates in 95% of the seats across South East England is a testament to you, to our branch structure, and indeed to what we've been working to build for many, many years. So from me, thank you for responding to that call last year, and to see councillor groups on county councils all over the South East, and as many as 17 victories in Kent. I think the 2nd of May is going to prove to be an even bigger turning point than the Eastleigh by-election. I'll admit myself, I was surprised by the number of votes we got, but I really do think we should give our new county councillors a bit of a cheer. So can you stand up, please? Those of you that are county councillors, well done. Now, of course, the next morning in Westminster, there was a pretty extraordinary atmosphere, one of total blind panic, because no party had managed to secure more than 30% of the vote. If you think about it, they all did badly. You know, Cameron's party did badly, Clegg's party did badly, Miliband's party did badly, and there we were. And of course, with that and with Eastleigh, what they've tried to do is they've tried to write off the UKIP vote by saying it's a protest vote. In fact, if they want to be really derisory about us, they say it's just a protest vote. But I can promise you that it is more than a protest vote, because you might have noticed I launched myself on what was called the Common Sense Tour of England with my yellow trousers, and off we went. And it didn't matter where we went. It didn't matter whether we were in the rural parts of the southwest or the more industrial parts of the Midlands and the northeast. Wherever we went across the country, we found that our message was resonating with people. And the reason that UKIP is doing as well as it is, and the reason those results are impressive as they are, is, I think, twofold. Firstly, I think the age of deference towards our political parties and our leaders is dead. We in the past might not have liked a particular leader or a particular government or some of their policies, but we basically thought that they had the interests of the country at heart and that they were trying to do the right thing. And I think increasingly there is a wholesale rejection. In fact, I'd go further, it's almost a repulsion by what people see as three political parties run by people who've basically all been to the same schools, to the same Oxford colleges, none of whom have ever done a day's work in their lives. Never. And who are so hidebound by political correctness and by a total lack of courage that they've now virtually merged into one social democratic mush in the middle. But worst of all, they simply refuse to stand up and do what a British government and opposition should attempt to do. They refuse to stand up and put the interests of this country and the people of this country first. They refuse to do it, and we've rejected them. And they say to us, I'm sure you've all experienced this year, they say to us, you are the only party saying what we think. And it's right. We've become in many ways the conscience for Middle England. In many ways we have. It's what ordinary people are talking about at home, at work, or wherever they go. And I think also we've been proved to be right. We've been proved to be right. In fact, I've never seen so many swivel-eyed loons in one room in all my life. Actually, I must say that I was enjoying the campaign. It was going well, and I really thought, Steve and I talked about what our prospects were. I have to say, I thought we'd get 18% of the vote, maybe 17% of the vote, something like that. And then on that Sunday morning, the last Sunday before the election, and I was in the kitchen, and Sky News was on, and there appearing in his garden, looking as though he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards after a heavy Saturday night, was Ken Clarke. And we've had to put up with lots of it over the years, haven't we? Cranks, eccentrics, lunatics, gadflies. I was once described in the European Parliament by a Labour MEP. He said Mr. Farage is a paranoid reactionary living on the fringes of society. So, well, those that know me might say there's something in it, but there we are. But, you know, I thought I'd heard it all. And then Ken Clarke says, they're a bunch of clowns. Thank you, God. In fact, I think Ken Clarke is probably one of the cleverest political double agents in history. He must be on our side. And I think I'm going to inaugurate an annual Ken Clarke Prize with a £1,000 sum for the person that does the most to get back the independence, liberty and freedom of this country. But please, and especially as we're here in the southeast, which is just about the strongest part of the country for the Conservative Party, please do not buy in to a media agenda that is still struggling to listen and understand. Please do not buy into the idea that somehow UKIP is simply a breakaway fringe on what they call the right of the Conservative Party. You've all read that. You've all heard that. You've all seen that. Apparently, it is right-wing to believe that we should govern our own country, live in a free democracy, and hand down to our children and grandchildren that was fought for and defended by our grandparents and our great-grandparents. That isn't right-wing or left-wing. It's about what's right for this country. And it also doesn't bear scientific examination. Look at that 28% of the vote we got in Eastleigh. Now, after the result, Lord Ashcroft spent an absolute fortune in finding out who were the UKIP voters, why had they voted UKIP, and who had they voted before. Indeed, I'm very grateful to Lord Ashcroft for saving us the money. We don't need to do it ourselves. But what did he find? Against those who voted for Diane, what did he find? He found that a third of the voters who'd voted for us in Eastleigh had come to us straight from the Conservative Party. He found that a third of the voters had come to us straight from the Liberal Democrats. He found that 20% of the voters who voted for us had come from Old Labour, and that 10 to 15% of our voters had come from people who had not voted for any political party for 20 years or more. And we have got to send this message out, that regardless of your political background, regardless of your age, regardless of your colour, regardless of your religion, this party is here for you. We are a true national political party, drawing in support from across the board, and it is in fact UKIP's greatest strength. And we are changing. We are changing the political agenda in this country. It started, as I said, with David Cameron's speech about a referendum back in January of this year. And don't think that Ed Miliband and Nick Clegg will stick to their position of saying there shouldn't be a referendum. They too will both promise a referendum when the next general election comes. It's almost become a sort of British political tradition that everybody offers a referendum and nobody ever delivers one. Well, we're going to jolly well make sure there is a referendum, because if UKIP hadn't done well, there would never have even been a debate or a discussion in this country about a referendum. And if you really want a referendum, if you really believe the British people should decide their own future, then UKIP is the only party you can possibly go out and vote for. But it's not just that, is it? You might have noticed that we've been changing the agenda on one or two other things. Now, for sort of 2 or 3 decades, perhaps more, it's been considered impolite, wrong, to discuss the question of immigration. The political class decided that it was much better, much easier, and much more convenient just to sweep the whole thing under the carpet and to pretend that it's not happening. Well, you could argue that immigration actually didn't pose a problem in this country up until about the turn of the millennium. And that is because immigration in Britain from 1950 up until just after Blair got into power was running at about 30 to 50,000 people a year. Not a huge figure in a country with a population of over 60 million, not a figure so big that there wasn't a reasonable prospect of assimilating people into our society. But what has happened over the course of the last decade is that we've averaged 500,000 new people every single year coming into this country. And I think it's an absolute duty that UKIP has spoken out on this issue. And we do so as a non-sectarian, non-racist political party, happy to welcome good people. But we haven't just opened the doors to good people that work hard in this country. We've also opened the doors to bad people. We've opened the doors to criminal gangs. We've opened up our benefit and housing system to people from all over Europe when, frankly, it's blindingly obvious that with 1 million youngsters unemployed in this country and a dramatic social housing crisis, that what we ought to be doing is controlling migration into Britain and putting the interests of the British people first. Now, those arguments have had such strength and such resonance that now, after all these decades of not talking about it, everybody's talking about it. Mr. Miliband's been giving speeches on immigration. Mr. Clegg's been talking about immigration. Mr. Cameron has been talking about making sure that benefits are not open to people from across the world. In fact, I have to tell you, listening to the tough talk from the other three party leaders, some of their right-wing rhetoric really worries me, you know. And they're talking now about wind farms. Do you see that in the week? Talking about wind farms, and one or two desperate MPs from rural constituencies who fear they're only 22 paychecks away from the dole heap. Well, it's not wrong, is it? Saying that, you know, wasn't it marvellous that local people had a veto power now over wind farms? And then you read the small print, and you read what Eric Pickles has to say, and they're going to be given a greater say. Isn't that nice? You see, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen, is they are pandering to our agenda on a whole host of issues, in a belief that in doing so, they will take back the voters that have defected to us, and they're wrong. They're wrong because, actually, every time their policy positions get that little bit closer to our policy positions, but without them being able to actually offer proper alternatives because we are not a self-governing nation, all they are doing is further legitimising everything this party has stood for 20 years, and when people look at that, they say, do you know what? We're going to vote for the real thing. So I think UKIP now is stronger than it's ever been. But they've also started attacking us. Well, that's okay. That's the nature of politics, you would have thought. But I tell you what's not okay. What's not okay is what happened to me in Edinburgh. I mean, being locked in a pub, I ask you. Well, I couldn't resist that, could I? Yeah, I must admit I have had a few lock-ins in my life, but none quite like that. But what was even more unacceptable was what happened in Brighton this week. And in Brighton this week, Nigel Farage, the local chairman, had booked Hove Town Hall. The local branch had worked hard. They'd put 20,000 leaflets out advertising the meeting. And it was, I've done 1,000 of these over 20 years around the country. People are welcome to come to our meetings, welcome to come to my meetings. And I always say at the beginning, whether you're here as a member, whether you're here as a supporter, or whether you've come along just to confirm that you really don't like me or UKIP at all, you're all welcome. And if you've got a contrary point of view, I will let you make that contrary point of view. Have your say. We'll have a debate. It's why people come along to public meetings. They want to hear a range of debate. And we did this on the Common Sense Tour, all over the country, to great effect. There was opposition in every hall. And really, in a political meeting, that's right and proper. And it's as it should be. And indeed, I'm proud of the fact that we're the only party that does public meetings in this country, because all the rest have gone to ground. I'm proud of that. But what happened on Monday was an organisation that is called Unite Against Fascism put 100 people, 70 protesters outside the hall, 30 protesters inside the hall, and they did it with the explicit wish that they would stop me speaking in Hove. Now, one or two things we need to say about that. The first is the idea that we somehow represent fascism when we represent democracy, individual liberty, defence of habeas corpus, and all the things that UKIP has stood for as the only libertarian voice in British politics, means they've got completely the wrong target. And the idea, the very idea that you should stop people speaking freely in a democracy is profoundly anti-democratic and very, very dangerous behaviour. But I notice, if you look at Unite Against Fascism, that the president is Ken Livingstone, that the parliamentary officer is Peter Hain, and the European parliamentary officer is one Claude Moraes, somebody that I've known well and actually rather liked over the course of the last 14 years that I've been in Brussels. It is perfectly clear that UAF is funded by the same trade unions that fund the Labour Party and is given its legitimacy by the Labour Party. I am not surprised that Alex Salmond refused to condemn the people that made life for Stuart Wheeler, Gwaine and myself so difficult in Edinburgh. I'm not surprised in the least, because I've long known that the extremes of Scottish nationalism, frankly, are no different to the EDL or many other extreme forms of nationalism. But I have written this week to Ed Miliband, as leader of the Labour Party, as leader of UKIP, to say that whilst I disagree with Mr Miliband on many points of policy, I believe him to be a decent Democrat, and I've asked him either to get this organisation under control or for the Labour Party to disassociate itself from Unite Against Fascism. And Mr Miliband, I am waiting for an answer. I hope you do the decent thing. Whether you do or whether you don't, the one thing I want to say to all of you in this hall, and one thing I'm absolutely determined will happen, is whatever these protesters try to do, they will not stop me and they will not stop UKIP from engaging in debate with the British people. They won't stop us. Now, one of the benefits of this year, and one of the benefits of your hard work and the leaflets you've been putting out and the new websites we've got and everything else, one of the benefits is that our party membership is up by 50% in the course of the last year. So UKIP is booming, UKIP is growing, and we're attracting a lot of very interesting people. Defections from Conservative councillors, defections from Labour councillors, defections from independents, people from across the spectrum joining the party. And I want to introduce you this morning to another new member, somebody who is joining UKIP, somebody who up until now has done a lot to support the UKIP cause, done a lot to support the Eurosceptic cause. But today, and it's a brave thing, in front of all of you, he has decided to come out. I'm sorry, I said I was going to do that, didn't I? Patrick O'Flynn is the chief political commentator on the Daily Express, and he's known to all of you. And he's a bit of a hero within the Eurosceptic movement because without him, I think there's no doubt that the Daily Express would not have taken that move to be the first national newspaper to advocate that Britain leaves the European Union. Patrick's hand in that was very, very important indeed, and we thank you enormously for doing that. Now, I know you're keen to get up here, but hang on, I haven't finished just yet. So Patrick's hand in that was very, very important. And I know something, he is liked, admired and respected across the lobby. People like him. He's a journalist of integrity. He's a journalist of principle. And he's become a fully paid up member of the UK Independence Party. And for the first time today, he will address us as a UKIP member and tell us what his plans are. Could you please give a huge welcome to Patrick O'Flynn. Okay, all right, very good. That's a reasonable build-up. It's a good start, you know, so it's yours. Get on with it. Where do I sit?
Wow, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Morning. When I had the honour of addressing this conference a year ago, albeit in a slightly smaller hall, it felt big enough at the time, I began by using a famous Frimley phrase. Now, seeing as the glitter ball is there, we're in the biggest hall, I believe the place where the World Darts is held, and this might even be the hockey and the dartboard behind me. I can't resist beginning with the same phrase again. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's play darts. And my goodness, isn't that what UKIP has been doing in the intervening 12 months, with the faces of David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and Ed Miliband on the board, and now riddled with holes. As Nigel spoke to you about a few moments ago, it's been an absolutely amazing 12 months for UKIP. Those parliamentary by-election results, the brilliant local election results, and at long last the media and newspapers other than just my own have been forced to take note and sit up and realise that UKIP is a mainstream party and a fast-growing party, not a minor party, not a fringe party at all. Now, this year, I've moved from being a well-wisher and Fleet Street champion of UKIP to being one of you, and one of nearly 10,000 new members this calendar year alone. It's become fashionable to say that the appeal of UKIP is no longer about getting Britain out of the EU. But while there are many other attractions to UKIP, many other fine policies, I have to say that for me, the great patriotic cause of getting our country back, of becoming a self-governing nation once again, remains the overwhelming priority. Now, I've thought deeply about my own contribution to this preeminent patriotic cause, this central change in our politics from which so many other beneficial changes can flow. And without blowing my trumpet too much, because probably Nigel blew it too much a moment ago, I think I could look back on this time and say I made a difference by helping make the Daily Express Britain's first better off out national newspaper. I believe I have done something to change the media climate towards the idea of leaving the EU and towards UKIP itself. So I could sit on the sidelines and congratulate myself for being ahead of the game on this one, as other political commentators gravitate towards my own position. But I have to tell you that securing and then winning a referendum on getting out remains a massive political challenge. And I've concluded I do not want to, and indeed couldn't bear to look back in decades to come and have to tell my grandchildren, I'm sorry, but we lost and I could have done more. I want to be able to tell them to be proud of their sovereign nation, of its magnificent past and its exciting future, and say, "We won, and I played my part." So I've come to the view that my biggest contribution over the period ahead could be, as a UKIP MEP, fighting full-time alongside Nigel as part of his team to free Britain from the embrace of the undemocratic European superstate. So I'm going to try and persuade you of that in the weeks and months ahead. Now, there's a fellowship between us all in pursuing our great cause, and each must play his or her own part, and a full part, if the goal is to be secured. And I'm reminded of J.R.R. Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring. Only our mission is not to throw a ring into the burning fires of Mordor, but to return the EU's circle of stars to a place where the sun doesn't shine. Now, before the media get any ideas, and it does feel funny for me to refer to the media as a separate entity from myself, let me say I'm not actually likening Mr. Barroso to an orc, or Herman Van Rompuy to Gollum, although now one thinks of it, there is certain physical resemblance. But I am saying the mission being spearheaded so brilliantly by Nigel Farage and by UKIP is just as noble a cause as that of Frodo and Gandalf. And I know I play my part. I don't know whether I can play the part of communications wizard or supporting hobbit or perhaps cantankerous dwarf. I rather fancy myself as the elfin archer, actually, but I don't think I've got the cheekbones for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, whatever lies our opponents try to spread, this is not about Little England, it's about Great Britain. It's about a confident global trading nation that can sell to the sunrise economies of the Commonwealth as well as to the stuttering ones of the Eurozone. It's about a nation in charge of its own borders and its own destiny, its laws made by Parliament on behalf of the people and not in Brussels at the behest of the Eurocrats. I have not the slightest doubt that it's Nigel and UKIP and all of you in this hall that forced the Prime Minister into offering an in-out referendum in the next parliamentary term. After all, I heard Mr. Cameron often enough in the House of Commons telling his own MPs that a referendum would be a bad idea. He didn't want to make the pledge, but he was forced to by the application of the UKIP thumbscrews. So let's put Miliband on the UKIP rack next, and then reserve the Iron Maiden for Mr. Clegg. After all, they do say you should take care of business before pleasure. And when the referendum comes, as it will, I don't want to be supporting or even tolerating a party led by someone who wants to keep us in the clutches of Brussels, but a party that will fight with every fibre of its being to get us out. I may be a new boy, but I feel today that I have come home. So thank you very much.
Well, That's tremendous. Thank you, Patrick, and welcome on board in every way, and thank you for putting yourself forward and making that absolutely massive career-changing commitment. On behalf of all of us, thank you to Patrick O'Flynn. Thank you. There's only one thing that worries me slightly about him, and it is a concern that I've got. Listen, when it comes to Van Rompuy, all right, I'm the one that dishes the insults, not you. Even I wouldn't dare to compare him to Gollum, I've got to tell you. We've caused some very serious, seismic earth tremors in the body politic this year. But as we look ahead to next year, we can do even better. There is absolutely no reason that we cannot, in the European elections, in the late spring of next year, there is no reason at all, and it's my ambition, I want UKIP to come first in the European elections next year and to cause an earthquake in British politics. That's our goal. But there's more to it than that, because on the very same day that people will go out and vote in the European elections, they will also be going out to vote in unitary and district council elections, including, of course, London this year as well. In fact, there'll be nearly 5,000 seats up for grabs at the end of May next year on those local councils. We managed to not only to win nearly 150 county council seats this year, we were also second in nearly 900 county council seats this year. In fact, we were second in more seats than any of the other parties. Just imagine what we could achieve on the same day that we win a European election. We wouldn't be talking, would we, about winning 150 seats? We'd be talking about winning a vast number of seats, and that is what we've got to do. And here, in the South East, we've roughly the same number of seats up next year as we had this year. There are 579 unitary and district council seats within the South East counties that will be contested next spring. And so the call comes out again. Now, I know that some of you who've been in UKIP a long time will think that I'm some sort of rerun of a First World War general, urging you all to go over the top. And in the past, when I urged you to go over the top, we got pretty shot up and very often didn't have much to achieve from it. But this year, you saw the results. And next year, we could achieve some absolutely fantastic results. And I want the call for candidates starts today. It starts today, and those of you that want to help us really create this earthquake next year in every way we can, I want you to sign your names in the foyer. The tables are out there, the people are out there, and if you feel you can help us next year in those local elections, then make that commitment to do it today. Those with very overactive Facebooks need not apply. I know it's the party chairman's job, but I just thought I'd re-emphasise it. Actually, again, I'll refer to that. You know, half a dozen people caused us embarrassment, but when you think about it, given that we have 1,740 people out there, they were a pretty good lot. Whose mic is that? Well, I'm covered in microphone. I'm actually wired up here, so one of them's going wrong. So that's really what we've got to do. We've got to win significant numbers of seats at local level. Think how the Liberal Democrats, who'd been down to a dozen seats in Parliament, but got up to over 60 seats in Parliament, did it. They did it, and think of parts of Hampshire, where they did it. Areas that had previously been safe Conservative constituencies. They did it by building up a gang of district and county councillors. They did it by breaking the perception that at local level it was a wasted vote to vote for the Lib Dems because they couldn't win. And if the electors in a parliamentary constituency think you're in with a chance, then you are in with a chance. Because it's all about perception. So let's win across the southeast and in the rest of the country too. Let's win significant numbers of district and unitary seats. Let's bolt that on to the existing structure we've got for the county councils. And then let's work out which are our best target constituencies for the general election of 2015, and let's box clever. Let's throw the kitchen sink. Let's target like crazy for 2015, and let's make sure that this party achieves a decent representation in the House of Commons in 2015. If we get it right next year, if we get this right next year, and we've got momentum behind us, we will be a significant force in the House of Commons in 2015. And I think that perception about UKIP has already begun to change. We proved on May the 2nd that we can win and win big under the first past the post electoral system. And we're also breaking down the counter-argument that is put out against UKIP. You see, here in the south of England, the voters are told, if you vote UKIP, you'll split the vote and we'll get Labour. And in many parts of the north of England, the voters are told, if you vote UKIP, you'll split the Labour vote and you'll get the Tories. And these are the arguments that are put out by the other parties to try and stop people from voting UKIP. But what we saw on May the 2nd was actually, if you go out and vote UKIP, you get UKIP. Make no mistake about it, you'll read speculation in the press about deals. You know, who am I going to do a deal with? Can I make it absolutely clear? My priority is not actually to do a deal with anybody. My priority is not to abolish UKIP and to hand it back to the same political parties that gave away our independence, liberty, democracy, freedom and control of our borders in the first place. That is not going to happen. UKIP is a real, genuine, vibrant force in British politics. We are here to stay, and I think far from us now being the party that's against something. What we're going to have to do in the run-up to the 2014 elections and in the run-up to the 2015 elections is we almost don't need to tell people anymore what's wrong with Brussels. They've worked it out. We almost don't need to tell people we have a problem with immigration control. They've worked it out. We almost don't need to tell people that the Labour government and this coalition are bankrupting us, that the deficit is not under control, and that effectively what we are doing is stealing money from our grandchildren. They know that. We don't need to tell them that social mobility is the lowest it's been for 50 years in this country, because they know that actually the rarefied 7% who get private education are now dominating the whole country. They know these things. No, what UKIP needs to be is not a party any longer that tells people what's wrong with this country. UKIP needs to be a party that tells everybody what could be right about this country, and leaving the European Union, ladies and gentlemen, won't solve our problems, but it will give us the ability to solve our problems. It'll give us back our democracy. It'll give us back our self-confidence. And I believe that our collective efforts thus far in 2013 have brought that great day ever closer. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, all right. Are we on time? Perfect time. Really good, really good.